And without further ado, we will go ahead and begin. This is the informational session for Marvelous Potential, a program of the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative and Pacer Sports and Entertainment. My name is Daryl Lockett. I'm the Executive Director of the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative, and we are so glad that you joined us today to learn more information about this outstanding program that we truly believe will allow individuals and leaders in the community to enhance their impact here in Indianapolis. We'll begin with a quote from Senator Robert Kennedy, a quote that he gave April 4th, 1968 at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Park here in Indianapolis at 17th and Broadway Streets. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion towards one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be Black. And in that spirit, we have created this new program, Marvelous Potential, hearkening upon the words of Senator Kennedy that evening and keeping the lasting legacy alive of both Senator Robert Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This informational session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative website following this presentation. We ask that you remain muted throughout the presentation. You have the option of turning on your camera if you so choose. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of this presentation. Feel free to use the chat if you would like to get a question in the interim. We will now move to a word from Pacer Sports and Entertainment.
The urgent need for real social justice isn't new. This struggle is hundreds of years in the making, and meaningful, sustainable solutions don't happen overnight. They take time and honest conversation. They take civility and passion, good faith and difficult decisions, discomfort and compassion. They take commitment and they take community. While we are doing our part, we know we won't solve these issues alone. The good news is we don't have to. Our city and our state have some of the very best civic, business, government, nonprofit, and faith-based leaders, so many of whom are committed to improving the lives of our most vulnerable families and strengthening our community from the ground up. In partnership with them, we will use our platform and our resources to invest in our neighbors and help make our city the strongest, most inclusive, and most just place it can be. We will focus on closing the educational attainment gap, mentorship and support for the youth in our community, addressing food insecurity and making sure all of our families have access to healthy food options, improving relations between our communities and those who are sworn to protect them, and empowering minority-owned businesses to play on a level court. I hope you will take a few minutes to learn more about our efforts, find your role and your passion, and join us in building a more equitable Indianapolis.
And all of you guys know the work and the great work of the Indiana Pacers and Pacer Sports and Entertainment, but I also want to share with you just a little bit about the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative. The Kennedy King Memorial Initiative builds on the historical events of April 4th, 1968 to raise awareness, provoke thought, and inspire action to eliminate division and injustice. It was that day that on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel at 6:01 p.m. in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. Martin Luther King was killed by an assassin's bullet. But it was also that day that Senator Robert Kennedy was on the campaign trail for the Democratic nomination for president and found himself in Indianapolis, Indiana, and broke the news to a community which was devastated to learn of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Kennedy King Memorial Initiative became a 501c3 nonprofit organization in 2015 and aims to create original programming that teaches, supports, and inspires, to convene candid and courageous conversations, to collaborate with organizations that align with our mission, and to cultivate a strong and vital King Park community. Senator Kennedy added, "Too much and for too long, we seem to have surrendered personal excellence and community values in the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures, in short, everything except that which makes life worthwhile. So, as we all know, 2020 was an interesting year. As we look back and we see this cover of Time magazine, we see the election of a new president, the outgoing term of a former president, the election of the first woman vice president of both African American and Asian American descent. We see the death of one of the greatest basketball players of all time. We see activists who have taken to the street around issues of social justice and civil unrest. We saw the passing of a Supreme Court justice. We saw the global response to a pandemic, and of course, the wildfires in the Western United States. Some would say that 2020 was the worst year ever, where we all felt our vulnerability. Yet, in that shared vulnerability, we revealed our common humanity. And we saw support and empathy and engagement around issues of civil rights and equity and social justice that we hadn't seen since the 60s, and some would argue that had not been matched in American history. And it's in that spirit that we continue. So we look to the words of Dr. King. Where do we go from here? To chaos or community? Do we emerge from 2020 filled with relief that we're out of the shadows and set our minds quickly to forgetting what we've just lived through? Do we build a world that is resilient to the challenges that we just faced? Do we set about addressing the forces of structural racism and systemic marginalization that set the conditions for the civil unrest and set the stage for the racial and socioeconomic patterns of COVID-19 morbidity and mortality? And that leads us to the beloved community. Dr. King spoke of the beloved community. He said it's a community in which everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, hunger, and hate. He popularized this in his time and said this was fueled by his faith. Such a community was in fact possible, one that would involve systems of law, education, infrastructure, healthcare, and municipal reform, because no one sector, much less any one person, could create it in isolation. And to realize that beloved community, we believe that it will be inspired by actions, awareness, and a deep sense of empathy. In January 2021, Pacer Sports and Entertainment and the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative announced the Beloved Community Partnership, a multi-year strategy that centers on the Landmark for Peace Memorial and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Park and expands to the broader Indianapolis community. This effort will align with other important work by both organizations across Indianapolis to address chronic and systemic racial disparities through K-12 educational programming, leadership development, and open dialogue. Why, you ask, are we doing this? Because of disparate outcomes that we've noticed here in Indianapolis. Residents of a Hamilton County suburb have an average life expectancy that is 14 years higher than the life expectancy of residents closer to downtown Indianapolis. It's a 28-mile divide or distance between the 46033 zip code and 46225. Yet there, it's an 83.7-year life expectancy compared to just 69.4 years in the 46225 zip code. A baby born today is likely to live only as long as a baby born in the United States more than 60 years ago. And the average lifespan equivalent to that of countries with poor health, such as Iran, Uzbekistan, or Bangladesh, is being witnessed here in central Indiana. Well, research shows that social determinants of health are more significant contributors to longevity and quality of life than either healthcare or genetic makeup or the two combined. In a very large sense, when we talk about social determinants of health, we're talking about economic stability, education access and quality, healthcare access and quality, neighborhoods and the built environment, social and community context. So some of these examples are safe housing, transportation, racism, discrimination, and violence, education, job opportunities, and income, access to nutritious foods and physical activity opportunities, polluted air and water, and language and literacy skills. Ultimately, we are seeking to eliminate division. You see to the left of your screen a report from The Economist that showed, first they looked at the largest 50 metropolitan areas to see the white-black segregation by metro area. And this shows Indianapolis to be about 8th of the 50 largest cities in terms of the black-white segregation that exists here in the city. We hear so much about Milwaukee, we hear so much about Chicago, but unfortunately, we're not too far behind in that list. And we know of the social ills that can create. As Dr. King said, I am convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with one another. And they don't communicate with one another because they are separated from each other. But this picture here goes to show it's not a forgotten history that we need to be mindful of. The segregation we know builds barriers. It may have been intentional in decades and generations past, but we still grapple with the lingering effects here in Indianapolis. What you see before you are red line maps of our great city. And if you examine very closely, you can still travel in many of these places and see disparities and inequities that exist upon these artificially drawn fault lines. We're focused on systems change. Systems change is about addressing the root causes of social problems, which are often embedded in the networks of cause and effect. It is an intentional process designed to fundamentally alter the components and structures that cause the system to behave in a certain way. And why is this important? Unless we address the causes of social problems, we will only be mitigating the consequences of malfunctioning systems, or even providing inadvertent cover for their failure. We will not create the change we want to see. Senator Kennedy said, "It is not enough to understand or to see clearly. The future will be shaped in the arena of human activity by those willing to commit their minds and their bodies to the task." And that's led us to Marvelous Potential. Marvelous Potential is an immersive leadership development experience, educating and inspiring local influencers, high-impact philanthropists, business leaders, and civic champions to create a more equitable Indianapolis. Cohort participants will have the opportunity to expand their perspective, explore systemic injustices and structural inequities, and further their understanding of how policy, law, governance, and culture propagate disparate outcomes in communities across Indianapolis. The title Marvelous Potential is itself taken from a speech Senator Kennedy delivered to students and faculty at Alice Lloyd College in Kentucky during his 1968 tour of Appalachia. As did his travels to the Mississippi Delta, his trip to Eastern Kentucky provided him a firsthand look at the impacts of federal policy on real people in real neighborhoods. It gave him incredible insight into what he called the irony between plenty and poverty, insights that informed his fresh perspective on how policy and investment could be better leveraged to build a community. And that is exactly what we intend to do here in Indianapolis in 2021. If you had the chance to read the op-ed piece co-authored by myself and Corey Wilson, the executive director of Pacer Foundation, you would see this. One of the most glaring lessons of the post-George Floyd era is that actually fixing the chronic disparities disproportionately plaguing communities of color requires more than generosity. Solving today's challenges demand what we call sneaker diplomacy, the kind of two-way understanding and compassion that comes only from walking a mile or two in someone else's shoes, or kicks, I might say. We realize that living and learning together across lines of race and class won't solve every racial inequality on its own, or prevent every killing of an unarmed Black man at the hands of law enforcement. But it will provide people of all backgrounds with a better understanding of how others live and what experiences they face. It will contribute to a shared humanity and common purpose, getting us back to the earlier conversation about the vulnerability we all felt in 2020 and how we are coming out of that in 2021. We're going to look at asset-based community development. Asset-based community development believes that meaningful and lasting community changes always originate from within. And local residents and community are the best experts of how to activate change. We want to focus on the resources and capacities of a community and its residents, instead of dwelling on their needs, problems, and deficiencies. We're inherently optimistic and assume that every single person has capacities, abilities, and gifts, and an accepted quality of life consideration is whether those capacities can be used, those abilities expressed, and gifts given. And ultimately, we believe that the strength of a community is directly proportional to the level at which residents desire and are able to contribute their abilities and their assets to the well-being of their community. Senator Kennedy said, "Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." The program goals of Marvelous Potential are twofold: to expand awareness of local influencers to the histories, systems, and policies contributing to inequities experienced in Indianapolis, to educate and inspire philanthropy, advocacy efforts, and policy action to impact the Indianapolis community and the nation. And we will judge our success by two metrics: quantifiable social return on investment of new philanthropic activity, and the positive impacts on an identified social inequity as measured by the social determinants of health for the local population most affected. The framework. As you see to the right, the schedule is 7 meetings over the course of 8 months. The month of December, there will be no activities of the Marvelous Potential program. An initial cohort meeting in September, followed by an immersive experience in October. And again, it will follow in that pattern with a cohort meeting in November, an immersive experience in January, a cohort meeting in February, an immersive experience in March, and finally a capstone symposium. So the time commitment from any individual looking to participate would be 6 half-day morning commitments and 1 full-day commitment. The full-day commitment would come in the 3rd immersive experience in the month of March, where we plan to travel to Louisville, Kentucky. We will have 2 in-person immersive experiences where we walk the ground and beat the streets, understanding the inequities firsthand from those experiencing them on the east side of Indianapolis, and secondly, on the south side of Indianapolis. And again, the 3rd immersive experience will be a travel trip to Louisville, Kentucky, where participants will leave in the morning and return in the evening. Within this framework, we will have bold dialogues and courageous conversations. There will be fireside chat speakers. Those are living legends who can share insight into perspective, into the history, and really the governance and even the advancement of Indianapolis. Cultural curators, subject matter experts to provide criticism and analysis with first-person experience in social and cultural theories. Historical partners, working with academicians to provide a historical exploration and understanding of origins and policies undergirding present inequities. We have a research partner committee, and these scholars will present data to predict trends, illuminate the scope and impact, and explore correlations of inequities experienced in Indianapolis. Community guides. These are human service providers and local neighborhood serving organizations on the ground in the community, able to connect cohort members with residents. And policy and social impact advisors, experts to provide support and advise in advocacy, policy, philanthropy, impact investing, and effective altruism. As you see, there is a capstone project, but we encourage every participant to think of a new intervention or a new solution that they would like to champion. And these social impact advisors will be able to help them with their theories of change and their logic model to strengthen and ultimately prove more effectual in their intervention. Areas of inequities to be addressed. And you'll see many of these are going to be fleshed out within conversation, within research, but also within the firsthand experiences that we have as a cohort. We're going to look at the correlation between crime, violence, and disorders related to the use of alcohol and other drugs, and symptoms of mental health disorders. We're going to discuss inequitable equity, exploring effects of disadvantaged financial capital upon entrepreneurship, opportunities within municipal development projects, community development, and wealth generation. We're going to discuss social inequities and civic engagement, examining the sociological and psychological upon Indianapolis and its communities. We're going to look at the disparate outcomes within education models, not so much the funding structure, but considering the impact upon the social, health, and educational development of children and opportunities for wraparound services. We're going to look at the impact of limited access to healthy food upon health equity. And we're going to discuss the built environment and its impact on public health, surveying the impact of Indianapolis's transportation infrastructure, housing, spatial, and environmental justice challenges. The application process. The Marvelous Potential Selection Committee will review every completed application. Committee members seek to identify those who are most likely to use their leadership abilities and influence to contribute to long-term and systemic social change in Indianapolis, add to the public's understanding of social and racial divisions, and build a future rooted in justice, equity, and inclusion. Marvelous Potential seeks to select a cohort diverse in experience, ideology, and identity reflective of the Indianapolis community. For those who've seen, the application is now available from the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative website, but within the application, there are 3 essay prompts required to complete the application. And please look closely. There's one mandatory prompt of all applicants, which is 300 to 400 words. And then there are the option to select 2 of an additional 5 prompts provided. Those would be less than 250 words each. We realize that you guys are high influence leaders and your time is precious. So we hope that you can articulate yourselves to the best of your ability in a limited number of words, but also not in a process that would be unduly burdensome to you and your schedules at this time. The application deadline is July 30th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And the cohort selection announcement will be made mid to late August. Many people have asked and reached out about a participation fee. The participation fee for the inaugural cohort of the Marvelous Potential program is $750. The participation fee covers the cost of all program execution. Limited need-based awards are available to selected applicants, but the ability to pay is not a consideration of the Marvelous Potential Selection Committee. In fact, when you're submitting your application, we do not want to know of an ability or a need when in regards to paying. So please do not send any payments with this application. Upon acceptance into the Marvelous Potential cohort, fee information will be sent in writing, as there is no application fee. Senator Kennedy said, all of us might wish at times that we lived in a more tranquil world, but we don't. And if our times are difficult and perplexing, so are they challenging and filled with opportunity. At this time, I am going to stop the screen share and open up for any questions that any of you might have. Feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you would like, that I may be able to answer any questions. I see, also feel free to just raise a hand if you think that would be easier.
Hello, this is Kim Boyd with the whole team. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kim. Thank you so much.
Yes. Can you go over the commitment time frame again?
Yes. The commitment for this program, the program will begin in September and end in the month of April. There will be one meeting of the cohort per month, and that is a morning half-day commitment where both breakfast and lunch will be provided. So, we anticipate this going from about 8:30 to about 12:30, and that would take place at 6 sessions within that 8-month period. And one session in the month of March would be a day trip where we would travel to Louisville, Kentucky. The location and site for these Cohort meetings will change and will vary. Some will be at the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative. Some will be at Bankers Life. And we are actually considering other venues around the city as well to expose cohort members to other landmarks and just places of interest here in Indianapolis.
Okay, my last question, you answered the question as far as the location in Indianapolis, so that will vary. But the trip, what would that entail? In I think you said Louisville.
Yes. So in Louisville, Kentucky, we have a few partners that we've identified and working with there that are showcasing, best in class solutions that Louisville has. One of the things that we wanted to really talk about is that, there are wonderful ideas that come out of Indianapolis, but we do not monopolize all good ideas and all good interventions. We want to identify best practices and new strategies and new ways that we can work together here in our community, whether that is through policy initiatives, where we will be meeting with legislators in the state of Kentucky, whether that would be corporate philanthropy, where we'd be meeting with corporations doing great work there. And we have participation from one of the largest corporations in the healthcare space in Kentucky as some of the interventions that they fund there. We'll be looking at a unique model for wraparound and comprehensive services and education that exists there, and talking to civic leaders about outcomes that they've seen there. What we want to do is, just get our creative juices flowing here in Indianapolis, so that as we're thinking of new interventions and new solutions, we can talk about these things, and we can talk with leaders who've seen some of the pros and cons of, different things that were selected. I see a question coming in as to why Louisville was selected. Louisville is, no better or no worse than any other American city. It provided an opportunity for us to get out of the state of Indiana. And the reason why I said the state of Indiana is because there's sort of unique policy considerations that could go forth even within our state legislature and our General Assembly, that we could look to another state for their practices. So we initially thought of the bordering and neighboring states with participation and just support from the corporate community there. We also thought it would make sense as they've gone through quite a bit in 2020 with the death of Breonna Taylor. Lessons that they've learned there, giving our leaders here an opportunity to talk to some of the legislators and the bipartisan agreement that they've seen around some of the policy initiatives coming forth since the death of Breonna Taylor, so that we can walk and we can see that memorial together and help us bond in that sort of travel experience. But it is one that would not encumber us to stay overnight or miss too much time from the influential work that you guys do on a daily basis in community. We have a hand raised. I don't want to mispronounce it. Is Shawana?
Yes, it's Shawana Ray. Yes. Thank you. I wanted to know, whom you are considering selecting. Do they have to have established nonprofit organizations and things of that manner, or do they just have a desire to exact change and experience and the like?
Yes, and I'll try and weave this in with the question from Pat Gamble Moore. Yes, we are not looking for individuals who are, from the nonprofit space any more than we're looking for individuals from the corporate community, from religious communities. We're looking for high influence individuals. And in this application, you'll see the question asked about your ability to influence others. Yes, this could be a wonderful educational opportunity, but we're very careful that we're not entering into the industry or business of poverty tours. We're not just showcasing the trauma that individuals live with on a daily basis, but we are educating individuals who are positioned or have their hand on levers here in Indianapolis to make change and make systemic change to these concerns. So whether it's a local elected official, whether it's a civic champion, whether it's a business leader, philanthropist, any high influence individual. So we're going to ask in this application process how you believe, with this understanding, you may be able to bring greater influence around these particular issues of inequity here in Indianapolis. So no consideration is given to an individual who might have their own nonprofit versus someone who's a community volunteer and just knows that they've been committed for many years about making change. I will say, and I hope this doesn't dissuade anyone, but if this is something that you're learning about for the first time, I would encourage you to, educate yourself and find immersive ways to strengthen your application, that you might be able to then apply that information, in this program, and not simply be learning it for the first time. Many of these conversations are with, former elected officials, civic leaders who are, much older than many of the cohort participants themselves. They'll be able to shine light on things and give, firsthand perspective about decisions that they may have made many years ago. But we would ask and would hope that this wouldn't be, just the first time that someone is hearing some of these things, because ultimately we would like to synthesize that learning with some of the experiences that you're bringing to the table in order to be more effectual within the community that we seek to serve. Are there any other additional questions?
Hey, Daryl, this is Pat. I think there was another, maybe you answered. Did you answer how many people were being the first cohort?
Thank you so much, Pat. I did see that coming. Right now in this first cohort, we're thinking between 10 and 12. And, that is simply limited by the capacity concerns of, some of the things that we're trying to do, but also to make it the most immersive experience, that we can't take, large tour buses of individuals. We're really trying to build a cohort that gets to know each other, gets to have, individualized opportunities to ask questions and get answers from, some of the local legends and leaders that will be interfacing throughout the program, and also the advisors on social and policy concerns. And if I don't see any other questions, I want to leave this slide on the screen. Again, you see the website, kennedykingindy.org/marvelous potential. But feel free to email info@kennedykingindy.org. Again, the application deadline is July 30th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. And again, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative and the leadership of the Pacer Sports and Entertainment, we thank you so much for the time you've taken today to learn more about the Marvelous Potential Program. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And we look forward to receiving your applications and building a first inaugural cohort that will ultimately influence Indianapolis, strengthening us and eliminating division and injustice. Thank you so much for joining. And again, this presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to the website and able to be shared with those who were not able to attend. So feel free to share with your networks if you think there are other individuals that you know or within your organization that may be qualified and wonderful applicants for this Marvelous Potential Program. Thank you so much, and I look forward to interfacing with many of you in the future.
Thank you.